so nice to see all of you here. I want to give you a quick 2 minutes. Please go around your tables and introduce yourselves real quickly, and then we'll get our program started. Okay. It is so very nice to see everyone today. I am Joanne Cohen. I'm the Vice President of Philanthropic Services at the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida, and we are all so happy to be gathered together. I want to take a moment to introduce two of our new TCF colleagues, Tom in the back, who's our new Director of Donor Services, and Kirsten Wright, who you met at the welcome table, who's our Donor Services Specialist. Both of them were instrumental in planning today's program. In addition, I want to thank the Lucy Gooding Charitable Trust and Bonnie Smith and her board for providing funding to help us bring these informative programs to all of you. Today is Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday was created in 2012 based on a simple idea, a day to encourage people to do good. We in Northeast Florida know a lot about encouraging people to do good. All of you as funders in our region give your time, like coming to learn about issues today, your talent in sharing your experiences with each other and your nonprofits, ties, telling your friends and colleagues about what you learn, and your treasure, making a grant or a gift to a cause that you support. You demonstrate the principles of Giving Tuesday every day. But I do want to thank you on behalf of the nonprofits that we all partner with and our neighbors whose lives we work together to support. Today we're going to hear about expanding affordable housing. As is our practice, this is a working lunch, so please feel free to eat, and there will be time for questions and answers at the end. We are so pleased to be joined by incredible colleagues today. We're going to begin with an overview of the affordable housing area by our colleague at TCF, James Coggin. Our panel will follow James, and their bios were at your seats. James is a program director at the Community Foundation, where he oversees our Supporting Neighborhoods program, focusing on expanding the supply of affordable housing and improving access to economic opportunity across Northeast Florida. He has extensive experience working with LISC and Operation New Hope, where he was engaged in supporting affordable housing needs across the region. We are very grateful that he is a part of our team. A Murray Hill resident since 2005, James enjoys living in the heart of Murray Hill with his wife Sarah and their 3 children. He's active with the Murray Hill Preservation Association as a board member. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce all of you to James Coggin.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see everyone. Affordable housing is a broad term. There's a lot under this umbrella, and we're excited to have a chance to provide a little nuance as to what affordable housing is, its importance, and the work being done to meet the overwhelming demand for affordable housing here in Northeast Florida. So, why is affordable housing important? The Florida Housing Coalition is a statewide organization that advocates for affordable housing here in Florida. Every year they put out a Home Matters report, and that report pretty succinctly states the health, safety, and welfare of Florida and the strength of its economy hinges on an adequate supply of housing that is affordable for working families, elders, and people with disabilities living on fixed incomes. But really the benefits of affordable housing extend beyond those that live in the units. We know that housing that is affordable can reduce taxpayer expenses. For example, affordably housing seniors and people with disabilities cost taxpayers less than the alternative institutional care costs. Affordable housing, also housing chronically homeless persons who may alternatively cycle through jails, hospitals, and other crisis services can also considerably reduce costs to taxpayers. We also know that housing affordability boosts the economy. Money spent on affordable housing construction and rehabilitation, just like market rate construction, has a ripple effect on local economies. And thanks to the Florida Housing Coalition, we also know that affordable housing programs in the state of Florida project to create nearly 33,000 jobs and have a $4.9 billion positive impact this year alone. So in short, investments in affordable housing do in fact offer economic and financial benefit to the public. Many of us, when we think of affordable housing, this is what we think of. It's a notorious property, it's on the evening news regularly for all the wrong reasons, and it's a detriment to the community in which it exists. And properties like this one certainly do exist, but they really are the exception rather than the rule. So let's look at some myths about what affordable housing is and is not. Myth 1, picture on the screen here, affordable housing refers only to the giant, often ugly housing projects from the 60s and 70s. In reality, housing that is affordable can refer to a wide variety of uses and housing types, from privately run apartments that receive housing vouchers to new single-family developments with the look and amenities of market-rate housing. Myth 2, affordable housing is for those that don't work. The reality is the vast majority of people who live in subsidized housing work full-time. Their challenge is that many full-time jobs do not pay enough for a family to live in a median-priced home without being cost-burdened. In fact, the Florida Chamber of Commerce and other business groups support affordable housing because they know housing affordability is a major factor pushing and pulling skilled workers into our state. Myth 3, affordable housing development will bring outsiders into my neighborhood. Studies have shown actually that 70% of people that move into new housing developments already live within a few miles of their community. And myth 4, affordable housing is an unfair giveaway. Talked about this a little bit a minute ago, but affordable housing development stimulates the economy, allows workers to live near their jobs, and it helps kids stay in schools. So let's talk a little bit about the terminology for affordable housing before we go deeper. What is considered affordable? Broadly, we consider 30% of a household's income to be spent on housing to be the level of affordability. Going beyond 30%, we consider those households to be cost burdened. They're spending more money than they have available to spend on housing. That it comes with a cost, therefore going some other expense that is important. And how do we measure income? Income is expressed as a percentage of the area median income, which is adjusted for region and household size. So at the bottom of the screen here, you see our 6 counties here in Northeast Florida and the area median income for each. With the exception of Putnam County, which is at $55,000 and change, you'll see most of them are in the mid-70s. So as we go forward, we'll talk about percentages of area median income that are going to be adjusted for household size. So whether it's a 2-person, 4-person household, and whether they're at 50% or 80% or 120% of that area median. So what is affordable housing? What does it look like here in Northeast Florida? On the screen, you're going to see some projects from our panelists roll through. There's a wide variety of work that these 4 developers do. You'll see multifamily properties that have been built or rehabilitated. You'll see single-family homes that have been built or rehabilitated, and some instances where a small subdivision of affordable single-family homes has been constructed. You'll also see home repair programs that preserve and maintain homes that are already owned by low and moderate income families. Bottom line, there's a tremendous breadth of product in the affordable housing market here in Northeast Florida, and no 2 developers that you'll hear from today are doing the exact same thing. So what housing is affordable? Let's start by looking at the housing wage, which is measured by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. The housing wage is the wage the full-time worker needs to earn in order to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment in our market. HUD estimates that number at $1,059 for Northeast Florida. And at the middle of the screen here, you're going to see the housing wage for each of our 6 counties. There's a range from $1,471 in Putnam County on up to $2,140 in Clay, Duval, Nassau, and St. Johns. Just below that, you'll see the median wage for the Jacksonville metropolitan area of $18.41. So what do all these numbers mean? When we take them together, it tells us that we have a bit of a disparity here in Northeast Florida. We have a large segment of our population that doesn't earn a housing wage. In that, the median wage for Clay, Duval, Nassau, and St. Johns is almost $3 less. So that would tell us over half of the residents in those counties are not earning the housing wage that would allow them to afford the median two-bedroom apartment in their community. Looking a little bit more at wages, this map shows the number of hours that a household needs to work at minimum wage to afford a one-bedroom apartment this time. And I'll zoom in, I see some squinting and make it a little easier to see Northeast Florida here. So you'll see we have those 4 counties again in dark blue, indicating that it's going to take more than 80 hours a week of minimum wage labor to afford a one-bedroom apartment in these 4 counties, with our other 2 trailing just behind. Now, looking at how much Northeast Florida workers can afford to pay for housing, again, reflecting back to that number that HUD put out there of $1,059 for what is market rate for a 2-bedroom apartment, we can see on this slide there are important members of our workforce who are very vulnerable to being cost burdened. These are all the wages based on that 30% rule that they can afford to pay towards their housing without being cost burdened at the top. These are folks that we rely on in our day-to-day lives, for whom finding safe, decent housing that is affordable is a challenge here in Northeast Florida. So how many of our fellow North Floridians are facing this challenge? Let's look at the rental market first and explore the breadth of this affordability problem. How many low-income households are affected today? Column 1 here, all renter households in each county. Column 2 represents renters that are both low income and cost burdened in each county. I want to call you to number 3 here. This is the percentage of all renters in each county that are both low income and cost burdened. You can see that by county it ranges between 21 and 27%, with Northeast Florida as a whole having 26% of its rental population both low income and cost burdened. So more than 1 in every 4 renters in Northeast Florida are suffering from this issue. To put a number to it, that's 56,454 residents of Northeast Florida that, again, are not one or the other, but both low income and cost burdened. Let's take a look at the supply side. This chart shows the number of affordable and available units per 100 renters in our market. In a perfect world where market is meeting demand, each of these boxes would have a 100 in it. That means that there would be 1 unit of housing affordable to each renter in the market. However, this graph shows that the market is not meeting demand. If we look specifically, just to call out one, at the 0 to 50% AMI, again, somebody earning half of that area median income that we talked about earlier, that for most counties was in the mid-70s, only 51% of the demand in the market is met. And taking that a step further, in terms of how many units are needed to eliminate that deficit, again, we'll just focus in on that 50% number for 50% of the area median income. We're missing 36,869 units from the market today. That accounts for current supply and what is not there that is needed. So we have a lot of work to do. Taking a look at affordability for home ownership. This chart shows the last 20 years of our housing market here in Duval County and in St. Johns County. Duval's in red, St. John's in blue, by looking at the median sales price for a single-family home over time. As of 2020, all the way on the right here, Duval County's median home value was $218,000, while St. Johns County's median home value was $350,000. So what does that mean for potential buyers in our workforce? Let's do two examples. We'll look at Duval County, then St. Johns County. So starting at the top, as I mentioned, Duval County's median home value, $218,000. Then we'll make a couple assumptions here, just for the sake of argument, that this buyer could access down payment assistance of $10,000 and secure a mortgage for the remaining balance. So that would estimated payment for their mortgage monthly with taxes and insurance of $1,393. Again, remembering our 30% rule, if housing is affordable, we don't want our buyer to spend more than 30% of their income, so that would mean they need to earn $55,720 a year as a household. So again, reflecting back to this area median income number and the fraction of it that this buyer needs to earn, so for a two-person household, they would need to earn 93% of the area median income in order to purchase a home at the median sale price for Duval County. A little bit of room there, but it's pretty tight. That's going to exclude a lot of people from the market. Same thing for St. Johns County, starting with the top line, median home value of $350,000 to bring us to an estimated monthly payment of $2,267, which is going to require, again, keeping our 30% rule in mind, a monthly or an annual income at a minimum for $90,680. So in St. Johns County, it's even more challenging. A buyer in St. Johns must earn at least 151% of the area median income in order to purchase a home, again, at the median sale price. So who can afford to purchase a home in these markets? Listed on the screen, you see the 10 most common occupations in the Jacksonville market by employment level. On the right, you'll see the mean annual wage for each of those 10. So taking what we just learned from the previous slide, let's see what happens when we exclude positions that don't have a mean income that meets that 93% threshold for Duval County. The 93% threshold for that median price eliminates over 398,000 workers just in those 10 positions out of the market for a median priced home in Jacksonville. Doing the same for the 151% of AMI in St. Johns County eliminates 493,000 workers just out of those 10 positions. This is why the work that our panelists do to add single-family products to our market is so critical. It maintains ownership, which we all know is one of the most important tools to build generational wealth, as an option for the workforce in our region. Finally, we'll take a couple quick snapshots on where the market conditions are today and where they're heading. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here because you're going to hear from experts in just a few minutes, so I'll just share a few quick data points gathered by Zillow. On the right side here, the year-over-year graph, you can see the rent increase in Jacksonville was 18.5% for the past year. In blue and yellow, you see what it was projected to be, 3.3%, far outpacing our projection. It also outpaced wage growth nationally during that same period, which was at 10.32%. So year over year, our rents are getting less affordable. In terms of inventory, again on the right, inventory is down 27.6% year over year, creating high levels of competition in the market. And that's not just the single-family market, but also the multifamily market, where Jacksonville Business Journal has featured 4 articles just in the past month, highlighting transactions with out-of-state buyers, paying premium prices for properties in the West Side, Arlington, Intercoastal West, and Bartram Park communities. So it's not saturated one place in the market, it's happening all over. And finally, home values seen on the right here again continue to rise rapidly with a year-over-year increase of 19.5%. In the Jacksonville market, again, outpacing wage growth nationally for the same period of 10.32%. So all the data points that I shared with you earlier in this presentation are getting better or worse by the day, depending on your perspective. Affordability in our market is decreasing. Intense competition for land, housing units, labor, and materials is creating a very difficult market for affordable housing developers here in Northeast Florida. So with that ray of sunshine, I will invite our panelists to come up and we'll meet them. So if you guys would please join us. Yes, remember your chairs. I'm trying. All right. First up, Shannon Nasworth, the president and CEO of Ability Housing, a Jacksonville-based developer that focuses on multifamily housing and is working statewide. Shannon, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and Ability Housing?
Sure. Hi. Thank you all for being here. It's really encouraging to see so many people interested in affordable housing. For many, many years, people had a negative connotation of it, and Ability Housing has been working very hard for many years to try to counter those images that people have of affordable rental housing. We're a Jacksonville-based nonprofit affordable housing developer. We currently own 6 apartment communities in Duval County, 2 in Orange County, and we just opened 1 in Osceola earlier this year. On any given day, 800 households have a place to live in an Ability Housing property or one of the units that we operate. In addition to providing affordable housing for working families, we also focus on meeting the needs of the seniors, persons with disabilities, and people exiting homelessness. Last year, over 300 of our residents have been chronically homeless when they moved into our housing. So in addition to the housing, we also provide wraparound supports to enable all of our residents to be successful, whether prior homelessness or not. And because of that, 96% of our residents retain stable housing year over year. We're very grateful for all of the support from everyone in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Next up, Dr. Irvin Pedro Cohen, the Executive Director of LISC Jacksonville, a local community development financial institution that supports nonprofit real estate development and for-profit real estate development. Dr. Cohen, tell us a little bit about LISC Jacksonville.
LISC stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation, and I'm very keen on saying Support Corporation. We are a 20-year-old agency here, well, 21 now, here in Jacksonville, and we are probably one of the largest financial intermediaries in the country, serving in 35 cities and 5 rural areas of our country. We are, again, the intermediary between people like Paul and Shannon and their work to really change the tenor of affordable housing in our market.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Next up, we have Paul Tutwiler, the Executive Director of the Northwest Jacksonville CDC. Paul, tell us a little about Northwest Jacksonville CDC.
Hi, everyone. Our agency works in the urban core of Jacksonville. To typify our work, we were attempting to bring a grocery store to the urban core, and we realized that the median income in our community was $18,000 a year. When you just saw that the median need for a family has to be $55,000, it helps underscore how difficult the work is in trying to provide quality, affordable standards for a district. And we are geographically based, as we began to work in the urban core of Jacksonville, to help provide, yes, affordable housing, but many of the other challenges to families who are sometimes struggling to just survive. Very pleasant work. We're very proud to have served 20 years in the city of Jacksonville.
Thank you, Mr. Tutwiler. And finally, Bill Lazar, the Executive Director of the St. John's Housing Partnership, working in St. John's County. Bill?
Thank you. I actually got my start here in Duval County back in 1988. I was hired at Lutheran Social Services to improve substandard housing for low-income seniors. And my board of directors had no idea what I did when I was out in the field, which is just as good because they would have been very nervous. We had a budget of $500 a house to just try and see whatever we could do to make a difference. I worked here for about 10 years, helped start the Jacksonville Housing Partnership, and then started the St. John's Housing Partnership in 1998. And our primary business line has been improving substandard housing. All of us are involved in trying to build new housing because we need it, but the biggest opportunity is maintaining our existing housing portfolio, keeping it in the hands of local community residents as opposed to being sold to investors, developers, and other folks. So we continue to improve substandard housing. We're building new homes for working class families. We've slowly gotten into the rental market. We buy existing single family homes in small rental units. We own about 75 rental properties, mostly in St. John's and Clay County. And we provide some HUD certified counseling for people who want to learn to manage their money better, become first time home buyers, and that sort of thing.
Great, great. So as Joanne mentioned, we're going to take a few questions from the dais up here, and then we'll have some time for questions from the audience in just a few minutes. So Shannon, I'd like to start with you. What are you seeing in this hot housing market, and what kind of challenges or opportunities does it present to the developers of affordable housing?
So as you mentioned in the introduction to this session, we're Jacksonville and Florida in general are experiencing an incredibly hot real estate market right now. Year-over-year rent increases we're top of the nation. I mean, literally, you can go to a conference in California, and they'll talk about Jacksonville being one of the hottest rental markets in the country. Investors are noticing that. We have national and international investors coming in, purchasing single-family homes for rental, as well as buying multifamily homes. As you mentioned, the Jacksonville Business Journal, has had many, many articles over the last few months. One property was built in the early 70s. In 2018, sold for $28 million. This year, sold for $77 million. It's 50 years old. That's insane. It was 150 something a door, and that's a lot of money for a 50-year-old apartment community. That just makes it incredibly difficult for a nonprofit. We do not have access to that kind of capital. It's also creating an environment where sellers can make demands of very quick closes, very short due diligence periods. Land itself is very hard to find that is already zoned. Affordable housing, of course, always has fun getting rezoned. We just had that experience ourselves. So you want to try and find land. It's going so quickly, a nonprofit doesn't have the opportunity to negotiate the same way that the for-profits do. We don't have the balance sheets where we can put out the capital to hold land and then go through the process of getting the financing necessary to create affordable rental housing. So the market right now is really, really challenging, especially for nonprofits. On the positive side, I will also say, if the Build Back Better plan comes through Senate anywhere like it looks like in the House, there is a lot of investment in affordable housing, and especially affordable rental housing, but also home ownership that will benefit everybody up here and our community greatly. So as a nonprofit, we're really striving to position ourselves to be able to access the capital we need so that when those federal resources come down, we really can seize that opportunity and create long-term permanent affordable housing. Because as a nonprofit, we're going to stay in that housing as affordable housing, regardless of any restrictions the government puts on it. Our mission will tell us that we have to keep it as affordable. We won't have it as affordable for as short a period of time as possible and then flip it and sell it and try to make a profit off of it. So we're really trying hard to position ourselves to be able to take advantage of those resources when they come in.
Fantastic. Let's go down the line. Paul, what are you seeing in this market? How's it affecting Northwest Jacksonville CDC?
Well, it's an amazing transition that's occurring. We began to see a community that has lost population for the last 3 decades to suddenly get an influx of new people coming in, which is both good and bad and threatening in some ways. But it's also understanding that the mission that we serve is to provide quality, affordable housing. When investors come in and lease properties, sometimes at top dollar, they're not using the 30% matrix. They're exploiting the people that's there for every nickel that they can get. Our mission tells us that we have to provide quality, affordable housing, so central air and heat replaces window units or sometimes little furnaces that people put out in the winter that unsafe. And so it is about trying to understand when we're trying to care about the residents there and their plight, it's helping the community position itself or sometimes embrace change because, as I mentioned before, bringing people into a community can have a mixed result. You really want to have an economic base there so the community can be sustained over time. At the same time, the people that we're trying to protect, if you will, helps them to keep their properties and keep them at certain standards. When hurricanes come in, those are the people who sometimes sacrifice because they have let the insurance lapse or they're underinsured, yet they have tragedies that suddenly befallen on them. It takes the nonprofit to be able to step in and provide those assistance to people who've retired over the years and sometimes in the past moved to an entirely different community. It's changed around them as they've grown older. And so it is with that vision in mind that we're trying to recruit people back, provide down payment assistance programs, working with families so they can afford the American dream and help them face or become part of the transition that we want to have in the community. Both embracing change, kind of steering the change forward, and have an inclusionary model so that we have a healthy community going forward and less dependent on the whims of change or the whims of politics. It's about understanding what the mission is, embracing it, and planning strategically with the players there in the community so they're part of the change that we imagine.
Thank you, Paul. And Bill, we saw in these slides earlier that St. Johns County is really facing a hot single-family market. What are you seeing down there?
I refer to it as we have people moving there that have more money than common sense. No, it really is becoming a tremendous challenge, and it's a very different challenge whether you're talking about rental opportunities for folks who literally are just not earning enough to buy a home at almost any price, and our middle-class families that want to buy homes and are literally getting beat out at the offer. I have people coming to us to buy homes that are placing offers and they're getting beat out 4 and 5 offers ahead of them and $20,000 and $30,000 over the appraised value. And at what point can they compete in that? The biggest challenge with some of this, because of this hot market, is value isn't what we all thought value was. Value right now is based on what someone can get somebody else to pay to rent that property. And when you've got folks who buy shelter and treat it like a widget, they just know people got to live somewhere. And at some point, you will put anything you can. St. Johns County is a good example. We have great schools. I think that's very challenging right now because the schools are incredibly overcrowded. They can't hire enough teachers because the teachers can't afford to buy homes or find a place to rent in our community. And they're really struggling to figure out how that school system, I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. But everybody's moving to St. Johns County for that opportunity now. And you're paying $50,000 more a home than if you threw that house in any other county surrounding us. But this challenge is that the real estate investors, when they ratchet up the price to buy something based on they know they can charge somebody $1,800 to $2,500, that affects across the board every other sale in that neighborhood. Because now the lot values go up. The same house goes up even more because, well, we've got a comp now over here. It's based on rental revenue. It's not based on value of construction. It's not based on government fees and regulation. It's based on what someone can extrapolate from someone who's desperate to find a place to live. And, you know, when we look and when James is showing all that information about people buying homes, that's been the foundation of America. Middle-class families grew up because they got equity in their home, and they used that to start a small business. They used it to go buy and sell. My dad had 35 years in the military. He bought and sold 4 homes during the time we moved around the country because he was able to. And in many cases, in part, that was because he was white, because there were a lot of folks that could not have started that back in the 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. But those are huge challenges that we look at and we say, what's going to happen to our population? That's where small business originated, was that equity that someone could get in their home. If they can't buy a home, you don't get equity. Renters don't get equity. And if you're paying too much, and James and I talk about this a lot, all the social service programs that y'all so generously support and keep alive in our communities, which are keeping people out of crisis, are all challenged because their folks can't find decent, safe, and affordable housing.
Yeah.
And that's the real impediment right now, is that for everybody, the market is challenged. And we're down on the lower end of it saying we need to double and triple our volume, and we don't have the workforce for it.
Thank you, Bill. And I want to get to Pedro here. Pedro, you actually are uniquely positioned because you support a number of organizations that do this work. What do you see when you talk to those organizations? What do you hear? What's your experience?
I think for us, the number one challenge is how do you disrupt poverty? Because all of these things have the layer of poverty associated with it. I take, for instance, when you think about a community like Durkeeville, where 44% of the residents are at or below poverty, I think that therein lies a challenge in and of itself. And so we have been really focused as an agency, at least for the last year, around how do we take that home and use that home as a tool to create family wealth. So our work for the next year, and at least the next year and a half, will focus on, one, how do we transition the home that's already in place from generation to generation to see some of that wealth that we're talking about. Secondly, we want to look at many of our neighborhoods and how do we make them destinations where people want to live. And so you may have heard about Project Boots. It's our intention to really get at the work by, again, taking a look at some of our traditional underserved, under-resourced neighborhoods and make them destinations where people like firefighters, people like teachers want to live in those neighborhoods. But we're doing it simultaneously by not disenfranchising the people that are already there. So we're building houses right next to the house that we're actually repairing. So that intel helps Paul with his work, and it also keeps the people who are already there in place. What we don't want to do is see a situation where we're moving people out of the neighborhood, which creates homelessness, but we also want to see people move there so that at the end of the day, when you're talking about those nonprofits that many people in the room have that thoroughly support, that the kids that live in those households have an opportunity to see what a firefighter looks like that lives next door to him, to see what it is that a teacher looks like that lives next door to them. Right now, we're having neighborhoods where it's concentrated poverty. And so what we're trying to do is be very intentional about our work, about bringing people back into those communities.
Fantastic. And Peter, I'd like to stick with you on the next question here because we're going to talk about capacity. I know Lisk spends a lot of time talking about capacity. So what are the challenges that you and your organization see facing in kind of the medium and long-term planning for your organization and for the housing developers that you work with?
I think for us, it's getting the residents to see the value in what they have in place. I think for us, it's about information and disrupting the information cycle. It's fun. Again, I bring up Durkeeville. When I think about the number of people who've lived in Durkeeville over the number of years, and when we did our research, it came back that only 5 residents, not 5%, but 5 residents that have lived in Durkeeville for over 30 years were taking advantage of the senior property discount. And so that is work that needs to be done. And so for us, we are going to be very intentional about not only creating generational wealth and family wealth, but also the information that we provide door to door, house to house. And that, again, comes when we're doing work with people like Paul Tutwiler and other chodos that are doing work on the ground in those communities.
That's important work. We appreciate it. Shannon, what is the capacity need for your organization? What are you seeing in the medium and long term that needs to be addressed to carry your body of work forward?
I would say, honestly, our biggest capacity gap is the capital gap. We need access to quick capital. Sellers are insisting on very quick turnarounds to purchase properties, whether it's an existing property that does not have any government restrictions on it, but is still affordable, and we're losing those really, really quickly in this community. It's affordable housing, so there's acronyms like crazy. It's naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA, and it's a huge crisis in Jacksonville. These properties are being snatched up left, right, and we've put in, I can't even tell you how many properties we've looked at. And the sellers won't talk to us because we're a nonprofit and we don't have the balance sheet that we can show them. No, we can close. We have the ability to close. Yeah. And so coming up with a source that is a subordinate bridge loan that gets taken out with permanent financing from HUD, we just need the time to go through the HUD process. That's our biggest capacity gap, is the ability to financially compete with incredibly large for-profit. Because the deals pencil, like Bill was saying, the interest rates are incredibly low right now. We have opportunities to create affordable housing that we won't have in the future when interest rates go back up. But the counter to that is so many humans are moving to Florida right now that we're really having a huge crunch in the housing market, and the investors are seeing it. They're snatching up anything they can get, and we're really going to have problems in a year or two when things start to turn and they start to offload all of these properties. But interest rates will be up when they do that. So we're in this window of time. If we had the ability to access that capital, in the last couple of years, we doubled out the size of our portfolio. We could do it again if we had the capital because the opportunities are there. That's our biggest capacity gap. Of course, we have the same issues, staffing and all of those things. I'm blessed to have the most phenomenal team of people who are dedicated, hardworking people. But it's, I've been searching for a CFO type person for, it seems like, ever. and it's just, we have the same challenges those ways as everybody else. But I'd say access to capital, quick, easy capital is our biggest gap.
Well, if anybody knows a CFO that's looking for a position, talk to Shannon afterwards.
Please come see me.
Paul, how about you? Northwest Jack CDC is a small neighborhood-based organization, really embedded in the community. How do you go about addressing your capacity needs?
Well, it's interesting that you posed that question. I was reminded of a policy meeting I'm supposed to be at tomorrow. So it's like I'm having to do both programmatic work as well as being a CEO. It's part of the work. They give me a broom, sometimes I have to sweep. It's important to understand that when you're understaffed, your responsibility is to make sure that it all flows to the people that you're trying to ultimately serve. I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do it really is an opportunity to provide even more if we had the right capital, and certainly about being able to understand the programs that we have in place. I too have a wonderful staff that allows me to do a range of services for our community. Affordable housing has been where we began in 2001. It's where we remain in the year 2021. It's about understanding the ups and downs, but the need and the plight of our community has been constant. So we began to try to figure out where the opportunities are. This was the community that was not necessarily affectionately known in many ways. It's where people were moving from. People wanted to, they talked about Arlington being the new North Side at one point, not in an affectionate way. Well, we embraced that, but we understood the challenge and the threat. Now people are moving to the neighborhood that don't necessarily have the community's best interests at heart or its residents. So we become that protectorate. We are trying to assemble lots when available, being able to provide those affordable housing products for people who just want to improve their own plight in life. Upward mobility doesn't always mean moving away from the community. So if they understood a vision for a community that's, oh my gosh, this is the place to be, or let's not sell grandma's house, let's stay here and become part of the positive change that we're trying to drive. It's about staying constant and staying true to the vision that we keep establishing. So it is about understanding we do need the capital. We need the ability to recruit staff that's going to allow us to be somewhat competitive with those people that are moving to St. Johns County. That's where the money is. If you are in the construction industry today, why would you work in Northwest Jacksonville? And we're trying to answer that question by providing a decent company with some modest kind of opportunities for growth. The need is tremendous. And the people that we're trying to serve deserve it. And we continue to fight the good fight. We're very proud to do so.
Thank you, Paul. Bill, what's the capacity need in St. Johns County look like?
Capacity, it really is. Shannon's right. Capacity starts with being able to compete with people who have very cheap money and they can pull it out in 24 hours. When we have to go, I work with local government a lot, but if local government takes 6 weeks to make a decision, we're toast. So we've been fortunate. We got one bank to give us a line of credit that lets us buy without having to ask for permission. They trust us. In Clay County, the Housing Finance Authority gave us a line of credit, $1 million to buy rental property. And within 5 days, we get an answer and we can get cash. That makes a huge difference. But it also means I've got to have people who can compete at that level. One of my guys goes to all the investor meetings and he sits and talks to all these guys and listens to who's buying and selling and who's flipping. I'm a builder. I know if I don't pay people a decent wage right now, they're going to be gone. We refer to it as drinking the company Kool-Aid. I want people who believe in our mission, but they've got to be able to live, and I want them to have a financial future. I don't want them limping along thinking, oh yes, sooner or later my ship's going to come in. So we have to pay competitive wages with what's out there in the industry. If we don't, we're not going to compete. And I run into government folks all the time who think, well, $60,000 is a lot of money. It's not. Not if you want someone to build a house and get it done in 4 months and keep it on budget and track it and keep the bank happy and everything else. So we really have to figure out ways to raise the bar on what we all pay. And I say this about all nonprofits because I've been in this long enough that I know most nonprofits exist because they have employees who've sacrificed their financial futures for their mission. And that's not healthy for them or for any of us, but they've done it because nobody else is. And it really is, huge for us to say, I want to look out for their future. I want them to stay with us for 10 or 20 years. I've been in this one company for 25 now. I want other employees to last that long, but having that capacity means that you've got to pay them, you've got to be able to challenge them. The folks that have a great work ethic, you want them to work for you. And you want them out there competing and not kind of going, well, gee, we lost one opportunity. An investor wanted to sell us 20 homes. 75% of value, they were already occupied. I don't want them occupied, but that's how they make their money. It's occupied and we buy them as is. So we needed $2.2 million. There wasn't any way to get that quickly, but if we could have, we would have had 20 more homes that we would have kept affordable for the next 20 or 30 years. So figuring out how to put those kind of math problems together in a hurry is what all of us are really struggling with, no matter what aspect of housing or development we're in.
Let's go a little deeper on that, Bill. I mean, when you talk about those capital needs and big deals that are out there, I mean, when you're really putting pencil to paper, what is it that's missing for you? What is it that you need? What is the scale of this kind of capital gap that you're struggling with?
Well, he asked me that question, and then I go, it really depends. Are you trying to develop or buy rental housing? You trying to create new home ownership opportunity where you're going to buy a house, fix it up properly, not put lipstick on a pig and sell it to some unsuspecting person who thinks it's a great deal? Are you trying to figure out how to, create something new and land, infrastructure, and everything else? So it really matters. And then I'm a huge admirer of what Shannon does, because you can't help people under 50% of the AMI if you don't have a huge unrestricted resource. You've got to have multiple layers. That kind of math hurts my head. And I say all the time, affordable housing, our success rate is inversely proportional to our profit and loss statement. We want to do things right, spend the money to fix it right, pay somebody a decent rate if that's an elderly couple that own that house and we now want to buy it. They deserve to get the equity. I don't want to beat them up, but I got to keep it affordable. And if I want to rent for less than what the market is renting, which is what we try and do, that makes it harder for us to borrow. So, we sit and look. I look at our rental property, and I said, we've got 70 units right now. If we just bought our rental properties up to what HUD allows us to charge for fair market rent, we'd bring in $25,000 more a month. But I'd also kick out every single one of our families because they couldn't afford rents to go up $100 or $200.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Peter, please.
I think for us, the thing that, that we're challenged by is the appraisal gap.
Yeah.
So we're asking Paul to build a house, keep it affordable, but at the same token, we're having an appraiser come along and say, yeah, he's going to sell that house for $150, but we're only going to appraise it for $130.
Yeah.
And so that gap has to be filled somewhere. And so I think therein lies, particularly in the communities that we serve, north of the city, traditionally red line communities, that appraisal gap is a very real thing, because somebody has to fill that $20,000 that Paul is going to need to sell that house. And I don't think that's something that we can overlook in this affordable housing process, because many of our traditional neighborhoods are still having homes that are being underappraised. And that's one of the things that, again, we are committed as an agency to look at in 2021, to how do we really challenge the algorithm that's being used to appraise homes.
Yeah, that is important. And Paul, I see you nodding along. I think you want to get on that thought.
Well, first of all, an affirmation. I was nodding. It was about understanding. I've lived this bubble here for 20 years now, and I've seen things at its worst. And in those 20 years, we've had a Great Recession, we've had a couple hurricanes, and now a pandemic. And you start to understand the plight of people who are suffering, and you start suffering with them. At some point, it is about thinking your way through it. In this current opportunity/crisis, it's about trying to figure out what could we do. We both want to take advantage of those vacant and abandoned properties that have been tax reverted and strategically plan how we could do that, do things better. That means that we have an opportunity to bring affordable housing to the district. Then comes the questions that my colleagues have both addressed. Where's the capital to make that happen? How could we, in a time of government downsizing, take an opportunity for us to build homes, and the market will demand, or the banks will appraise them and loan money 80% to 20% based on what they project the property is in terms of appraisal. We got to kind of make that work for the people whose incomes are X. Typically, if they're not making but minimum wage, some of those security officers or service workers, okay, then we have to provide some rental opportunities for them so that they can ultimately work their way out of their condition so that they can live better. We ultimately would love for them to stay in the community, because that's where we believe the future lies. We believe that if we can control the high rental to ownership ratio that exists right now, then we have people with long-term vested interests in the neighborhood. That means less crime. That means less many of the social issues that the community currently has. So we think holistically about the neighborhood. Certainly, real estate begins the basis of conversation, because that's where wealth begins.
Yeah.
You can accumulate wealth over time. Now the goal is to make sure that they're able to have wills that pass it forward and deal with other challenges. We have to figure out if the opportunity presents itself, certainly to work on establishing opportunities to build houses, help those families afford X based on many of the things that my colleagues help them to work with on credit, budgeting, so now they can afford. Now where will they be able to then buy? We want to be part of that solution. So it's a lot that goes into it. It's a wide range of challenges that we have, but it's just understanding the challenge that we began today's conversation. We think that we can do it. If not, we're wasting our time as a nonprofit. And I don't waste 20 years of my life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. And Shannon, to go to you on the same question, you talked a little bit earlier about kind of capital needs as one of the opportunities, but the scale of your projects is a lot different. So what's the same, what's different when you're going from, building a single family home to a 200 to 300 unit complex?
I mean, it is. Obviously, the scale is just much larger. And as I was mentioning, we've really been going after trying to acquire some of the existing stock to keep it as affordable. And it depends on the size of the property. Anything from 100 to 300 unit properties have been going up on the market. And we can get a 80 to 90% LTV, loan to value ratio, of the financing for the bridge loan. We've got to come up with that 10 to 20% bridge loan that will get taken out with a permanent financing. So it could be anything from $2 million to $6 million. It depends on how big the property is that we're talking about. And we're talking about a 6 to 18 month hold. So it's not a forever investment. It will be taken out. But we're not able to show the seller that we can come up with that $2 million, and they're going to the next offer because they want the surety of selling right now. That's our biggest issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question, Paul. I'll start with you on this one. We've talked about the capital landscape. We've talked about capacity needs. What's the funding landscape look like today for you to get those things done? I know Shannon mentioned some of the money coming down from the federal government. We have the city as a great partner that's helped grow and serve Chodos over the years. I mean, how are you meeting those needs that go beyond kind of financing to help your organization push through?
Well, funny thing about government changes. So it's about trying to figure out what's going to happen. Government dollars that are budgeted today may hit a year from now, and deals no longer exist. So we have to figure out the operational opportunities that are available today. Our ability to build today is directly proportional to what our financial ability is. The monies that we have, our existing lines of credit, to build onesie, twosies, 3, 4, when the need may be 10s or 20s. We have vacant lots that we've inventoried for a number of years that are poised for development. We have no shortage of opportunities to build units. In the past, it was always difficult to build a spec home because, gosh, you're going to build it and it may not sell. For any home that we build today, before it's complete, I have 4 offers.
Yeah.
So now we have a unique opportunity to build affordable housing in the urban core and then be able to sell it within 30 days of the house getting a CO or certificate of occupancy. So it's about understanding how we can control that at a measured pace and provide the opportunities for those individuals who are wanting to come in and becoming part of the change that we envision. So it's strange. It's our inability to build them fast enough hurts the vision, because what they're going to do next year and the government's going to provide, it's kind of like Christmas and Santa Claus.
Timely analogy. Thank you. Bill, how about St. Johns County?
Well, I think there's really 2 parts, and what Paul says is true. But when you think about this federal money that's coming, don't assume it's showing up tomorrow. And even more difficult than that, for those of you who have interest in different communities, government is different in every community. It's just like a mechanic. It's based on the person you take your car to, that hopefully they know what they're doing. I work in Flagler, Putnam, Clay, and St. John's, and a little bit here in Duval. And the housing staff in each of those communities is radically different in terms of their experience. I've got some folks that can't read a simple pro forma, and housing is nothing but a math problem. If you can't talk about the cost and the pro forma, you can't figure out, do they want to invest in it or do not? But it also comes back to the same thing with capacity. We consistently, as nonprofits, have someone say, Bill, I'd like you to take on and do this. We're going to buy 2 or 3 rental properties. Can you gear up and have staff to do something? Give me a 5-year plan. If you want to change the face of affordable housing, make a long-term commitment. If there's 100 lots, give it to that nonprofit and say, I'm going to feed these to you as fast as you can consume them. In the first year or so, you're probably going to move kind of slow, simply because you got to gear up, find the right person to run it. But then you're going to take off. When you give someone onesies, twosies opportunities, and then there's not another opportunity for 6 months while we're waiting for another funding cycle, we might try and do that again. You can't build your organizational capacity to maintain that. So that's, the funding that's coming is huge. And I'm sorry, but tax money is funny money. You can use it for lots of different things. If we think that home ownership is the basis of what people in America built their families on and built their small businesses and everything else, then what's wrong with taking some of those tax dollars? It's a one-time opportunity. It doesn't cost your local government anything, no matter where you are, and put it into writing down the cost of whatever it is that you got to build. Whether it's a large project like Shannon, if we've got something we want to do, put the money into it. The problem is that, like they said, we may be 12 or 18 months out, and we all want a decision next week because those opportunities we're losing so rapidly. So it's really trying to figure out, as Shannon said, can we come up with something that is a short-term, get the buyer happy, put money in their pocket, and have them wait. Some folks might. I mean, I'm more and more looking for people who have been born and raised in St. Johns County and saying, sell it to us before you sell it to those guys. I may have to give you the same price, and it gives me heartburn to pay that much for a lot, but it's your equity, it's what you've earned in your property, so at least give us a chance to do it and maintain something in the community. And we may find a family that's got 5 or 10 or 20 acres that might want to do the same thing. But we've got to look at it, and we've got to be able to build that capacity. It's hard for us to look down the road and say, I want to do this, if I'm thinking funding's not going to show up for 12 months. Because at that point, I'm kind of like, well, I might as well take a nap for a couple months. No one's going to listen to me if I say, would you please wait?
Yeah. Yep. We've certainly heard it's not the market for that. Shannon, what are you seeing for the funding landscape? How's it affecting Ability Housing's work?
I mean, again, it goes down to there's real opportunities presenting themselves right now. The low interest rates really makes, as a nonprofit, we don't need a profit. We don't need the cash flow. We're doing the property for the property's sake. Everybody up here has said that. We can take advantage of these low interest rates and create housing that doesn't need deep government subsidy, but we can't get to the closing table. Yeah. So for us, that's the biggest challenge. But there's also, this predictability, I think is the word we're looking for. Mm-hmm. Any business needs some level of predictability. Can I staff up for this? It takes time to hire staff and train them and get them all on board. If we knew there was a predictable business line, that we wouldn't be at the mercy of the next round at Florida Housing Finance Corporation, or the next priority of whichever local government we're working with, or the next priority of you've got to staff up and have a team that can work together that has some predictability of what they're looking to do. Yeah. And right now, affordable rental housing at least is a total crapshoot every single time. Yeah. It's very hard to get a robust business line where you're not putting yourself and your sustainability at risk if you don't get the right lottery number. And just for reference, in the state of Florida, with affordable rental housing, usually it comes down to your lottery number as to whether you are selected for funding. That is not a sustainable business model. So we as Ability Housing, it really isn't. We're really trying to come up with other ways to create affordable rental housing. That's why we're trying to purchase the existing stock and keep it affordable. That's why we're looking at doing mixed income. We can take our nonprofit status, not take the cash flow out of it. We won't have as many affordable units, but we can have some of the units be affordable because we don't need the profit. We're trying to get as creative as we possibly can in coming up with as many ways as possible to increase our capacity, have that sustainability, so that we're positioned and able to take advantage of opportunities when they arise.
Outstanding. And Pedro, we're saving you for last year. You're kind of in a unique position. You serve as an intermediary for a lot of these funds. So what's LISC seeing out there in the landscape?
I think we are priming ourselves with a level of intentionality to be able to not only serve Paul, but we also have 3 other chodos as it relates to affordable housing in, again, our most underserved neighborhoods. And I think for us, that's where we have to be. How do we set up a revolving loan fund so that Paul can now come to us, or Jerome can come to us, or any of the other chodos can come to us and build 3 at a time? And so I think for us going into 2021, we're going to have a level of intentionality around exactly 2022. We're going to have a level of intentionality about how do we better serve our chodos to build affordable houses in the communities again. And I keep going back to this. We have to make these communities destinations where people want to live. You get to that 30% number, you get well beyond that when you start to move out of our traditional enclaves. But how can we do that and make sure Paul is appropriately compensated for the house that he's building and the buyer can effectively purchase said home? So we are going to be very intentional with our efforts around setting up that revolving loan account so that Paul, at low interest rates, so that Paul and the other chodos can come to us and say, I want to build 3 homes at a time instead of onesies and twosies.
I love it. So for this last question, we're going to go to a keep the moderator out of trouble lightning round here. So as we wrap up, this is our last question, then we'll take questions from the audience. I appreciate your patience. What are a couple things that our audience can do today to help your organizations increase the supply of affordable housing in Northeast Florida? Peter, you want to kick us off? We'll go right down the line here.
Sure. Again, I talked about helping us set up this revolving loan fund. And then I think for $100,000, we can build 5 homes, period, at a time. We have through Project Boots right now, it's costing us $100,000 to build those 5 homes, and those homes will be in historic East Side. So we are being very intentional, and we're literally living what we speak. And so that's how we can get some help.
Great opportunity. Shannon, how about you?
2 things. Help me with my impact investment fund. I don't need only philanthropic, I just below market investment to give me this capital. And the other is friendly sellers, people who are willing to take the time. If you have a company that has a real estate arm, or you're a member of a church that was going to do a school and it's not going forward, friendly sellers really, really matter. People who are able to wait also matter.
Paul, what can folks in our audience do to help Northwest Jacks?
I recognize many faces, and many of you have been with us for a lot of years. Understanding the plight of a community is important. You began to look at successes, and everything is relative, and I do such a horrible job of just trying to make sure I stay in the middle, out of politics, but just being able to appreciate that there's 2 lenses. For my friends who invested in the Brooklyn neighborhood in Jacksonville, it was a beautiful job. The city invested a modest amount of dollars to bring in infrastructure that created the opportunity for the neighborhood to blossom. And it's equivalent to say that America's a great place except for the indigenous people who are there. Just get rid of them and you know what, we can do a lot. As we began to look at the plight of a neighborhood of often impoverished people who have a different lens of sometimes feeling threatened or not quite understanding the lens of others, and America is a capitalistic society as well as a democracy. Being able to figure out how we're going to gently encourage a resettlement of America in a way that's both fair and opportunistic, so people who can benefit from the uplift and the investment within a district. It's so important to be able to plan and then execute those strategies so that it's well balanced and you're not displacing a problem, but you're helping solve it going forward. And we would ask you to understand the mission of the Northwest Jacksonville CDC in that regard, because sometimes we're the only voice. They will come to us and ask us for help. There's suddenly a hurricane. We're like, well, that's not exactly what we do, but that suddenly becomes what we do. It's about being able to understand as people are losing properties because their families are squabbling over grandma's house who died a long time ago, and no one simply probated a will or did anything, so now an investor's buying the property for taxes. How that wealth never transferred from grandma's hard work to a future generation. How critical that is. So we began the conversation today with simply buying the house, owning something that produces future equity as property values do go up eventually, that we can then pass forward so that somebody can go to college, so that somebody can start a future business, so that somebody can do something forward-thinking, and that we're not constantly coming back asking for a handout. But it's about understanding how we can drive that conversation just from simply understanding holistically, it's not just affordable housing. It's a range of understanding from multiple lenses. We appreciate your support and your understanding. And ultimately, we asked you for your investment within what we're trying to do. Because certainly part of what we're doing is fighting a good fight, but it's not enough to pray about it. Invest. Help us provide those affordable housing products for those families who are there. We have just 50 units of rentals, which mean a great deal to at least 50 families who live within our community. We're proud of the, yes, modest 10 houses that we plan to build in next year, but how much more could we do if we had all the things in place to make that happen? So we ask for understanding, and we simply ask for you to measure what you can do to invest in the efforts that we're putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Bill?
I like Paul's suggestion.
Yeah. What two things can the audience do today to help St. John's Housing Partnership?
There's so much. I mean, the biggest thing I really think is talk to your peers. Y'all are business people, retired, active. You know people across all Northeast Florida. Affordable housing is economic development. It's not just charity. It always sounds like charity depending on how people put it together. But we are literally at the precipice of looking at businesses going under because they can't find the employees, and those folks are moving out because they can find a cheaper place to live and a cheaper place to work. And we're going to have businesses going under. You know, I was talking to Nassau County. They've got restaurants that only open in the evenings. That's a recipe for disaster. They're not going to last. But if you can't afford to live and commute to Fernandina, then what do? We need people to talk about this in ways that it really does impact on all of us. You know, we all talk about the savings. You know, hospitals, they save money if homeless people don't go to the ER. But those savings always stay within the same silo. The sheriff will tell you his job would be a whole lot easier if he didn't have to deal with homeless people. But he doesn't take money out of his budget to create housing for them. I love working with seniors. I've done that most of my life. You know, everybody will tell you it's cheaper for them to remain living independently in their own homes than to put them in assisted living. But you can't get in the assisted living money to fix up their homes. So we need this. We need a groundswell of people talking about this. It's literally affecting everybody in one way, shape, or form. It's the future of our communities, and yeah, we're competing with both people who are moving here with more money than more money than common sense. We're dealing with investors with real cheap money. We can get some of the cheap money, but that 10 or 20%, and I'm sorry. Affordable housing is indentured servitude on our parts. We buy into something and we agree to own it for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. We can't sell it. We can't flip it. It's going to be there. It becomes a bedrock of your community. So we need government to invest more in nonprofits or for-profits as long as they'll sign a 50-year lease. Yeah. You know, letting someone have something and then not paying attention to where it goes in 5 years is losing a huge community resource. But our elected officials need to hear from people like y'all, because to a certain degree, we're just hired guns, and we all just get paid to do this, so they think, oh, I'm tired of Bill. They need to hear from their business leaders and say, this impacts the future of my business if I can't do it. We need to get young people into the vocational trades. The building industry, we have dropped the ball on that for the last 25 years. We haven't funded it right. We haven't supported it right. Yeah. And now we're paying the price. You know, most of the guys that work for me are 45, 50, a couple are 60. They can't keep hauling plywood around. We've got to get young people in, and they're going to have to make a decent wage. You know, and if it's 20 or 30 bucks an hour, if that's what it takes to live in your community, you want someone to build your house or build the office space for you, that's what you need. So we need your help. I'm always interested. Grants are great. Yep. Low interest loans are great. It doesn't matter to us. We'll figure out some way to turn anything into housing, but we've just got to be able to talk to people who want to move quickly.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. And thanks to you for your answers and your thoughtfulness on this. Let's open it up to the floor. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll run you out a microphone so we can get some answers from our panelists.
Pretty much like Jacksonville has done with preservation of parkland. Is there any benefit of preservation of land for affordable housing as a policy?
I can try to answer a portion of that. I think one of the things that the city is doing around that from an intentional standpoint is establishing a community land trust. That's in the early formation in terms of what Jacksonville is doing as a community to address some of the issues as it relates to sort of putting into reserve land that they currently have in their possession. That's one of the things that I know that we are doing as a community to move this issue of affordability and keeping some of our residential lots affordable. Jacksonville is kind of at the early stages of it because land is still relatively cheap here, whereas if you go further down south where they've established community land trusts and they've had some level of success, it's because the value of the land is relatively high. In Jacksonville, because it's cheap, it's still some formation of how that's going to look in our community. But that is one of the things that we are doing as a city to sort of advance this notion of how do you put properties in reserve to prevent some of this from happening.
I'll add, every community gets some level of SHIP dollars. It's one of the affordable housing programs that Florida has based on property sales tax. There's a SHIP statute. Local government is supposed to set aside some land for affordable housing. Most of it is crappy land. It's wet. You can't build on it. There's no water and sewer to it. But that's what we need. We need folks to look. It needs to be land that is close to transportation so that folks can get to and from work, not all the way out in the hinterlands where you've got a 35-minute drive to get to your job. But that's one of the major roles that government could play, is doing that. The other thing that government can do in St. Johns County, which they don't want to do, is ask every developer when they come in with a plan, including these guys that are here now doing these build-for-rent communities. All right, fine, you're going to build 250 homes for rent. I don't care if they're apartments, townhomes, or anything else. Set aside some for affordable housing based at certain income levels. If they would do that, that would increase that. They might be building it instead of us, but it increases the volume. You realize affordable housing is the biggest market in America. You know, whether it's rental or home ownership, there is no bigger pool of people who want it. And everybody is just going, well, I'm too busy to try and deal with it. Well, at a certain point in time, we're not big enough yet. So if all y'all want to put your heads together and help, but that's it. It's the biggest opportunity around, and we're missing out on it because I literally see it all the time. Government says, I'm waiting for the builders and developers to bring me an idea. The builders and developers are saying, I'm waiting for government to let up on the regulations a little bit. And then the bank's saying, well, we'll kind of help, but maybe only 70% of loan to value. You know, I'm like going, come on, everybody. At what point is this not the most secure activity you can do? They're never going to be vacant. You build anything, it's not going to sit for long. Somebody will buy it. They're just, you know, the will is not yet there. And that comes back to people like y'all speaking up and saying, we need to make this happen.
Absolutely. Paul Shannon, any thoughts on preservation of land?
We have 50 units of affordable housing that, while I might be off the numbers, the median rent's about $800 a month, and that we require our tenants to have that needs to be a third of their affordable, the money that they can actually spend and live comfortably in the neighborhood. Were it not for those units, I don't know where our families would live. And so it's about understanding that the opportunity is there to charge twice that. We're trying to preserve and protect a certain, number of people. And as the dollars that we acquired those units with began at the government, so they were restricted. We have to charge this. As those 10 years or 15 years end, and some people are selling those units, they're expiring. If the government has 15 years, you must sell these, or you must lease these in an affordable category for 15 years. More and more of those units are coming offline. So that means fewer and fewer homes are available to those vulnerable families. And so we're asking you to, again, understand that. On the policy side, we have to work with government to make sure that we're always building more units so that those families will have a place to live. At the other side of that, we have to kind of figure out how to kind of improve the plight of those people so that they can actually afford more wherever that market may go. But again, it begins with understanding and educating yourselves about these issues.
And what I would say is, I think we all need to realize Florida has fundamentally changed in the last year. The amount of people who are moving to the state has changed. Jacksonville was really lucky. We were so much less expensive than every other metropolitan area in the state of Florida. We are now catching up very rapidly, and that's not going to stop. It's not going to change, and it's not going to go back to the way it was. The government has to play a major role, and the land trust is an important first step, but it's only a first step. And the government needs you as leaders in the community to help them do more, because it's going to take a lot of political will. Affordable housing isn't a popular thing. I just went through a rezoning with a bunch of neighborhood people not wanting, and I'm direct quoting from a public meeting, that riffraff in their neighborhood. And it was a low-income neighborhood. The people living around the property we're going to develop will be moving in. They were talking about themselves. Government needs the support of the community to make these things possible. The land trust is one step, but if this community really wants to be an inclusive community that has long-term sustainable growth for all of our businesses, small and large, for new companies, for our existing residents, our seniors, our veterans, we need to collectively have a strategy that is a multi-decade strategy that we stick to, we keep working, and we make the commitment that tomorrow is going to be different than today. We don't have any other opportunity. We can't wait any longer. Lip service has to stop. And collectively, all communities, not just Jacksonville, St. Johns County, I've tried to work there. I don't know how you do this, dude. But every community needs to be very intentional and hold its own elected officials accountable for what it's doing for all of the constituents, because it's going to matter to you. It really does. Your hospital bill is impacted by people who don't have an affordable place to live, not just the homeless, but it is, Ability Housing did a state pilot. It is 30% less expensive for the city of Jacksonville collectively to house a chronically homeless person than to maintain their homelessness. That is a documented fact. We did a pilot with the state to prove those numbers. But it's not just the homeless. Children who don't have a stable place to live don't get as good an education. They need the stability of going to the same school. They need the friends. They need the teachers. They need the relationships. This is the foundation of our future. These kids are my retirement. I need you to do a good job with them so I can retire one day and they'll take care of me. We all need that. So this is something that the government is in a key role, but it's not they're not the only ones responsible for this. We have to collectively insist on more and better.
Thanks, Shannon. Quickly?
Yeah, I want to just add something. John Delaney said something years ago. Economic development stops at the end of the sewer line. Infrastructure is the single biggest impediment to affordable housing.
Yes.
And 25 years ago, government started to get out of the business of doing infrastructure itself, and they put it off on builders and developers who have to borrow the money, make a fee for borrowing it, do all the planning and everything else. On the level of affordable housing, and talking about our Relief Act money, there's a bucket of money coming from the feds that if we looked at it and said, let's put in the infrastructure for 5 or 10 years worth of affordable housing, it might really make a difference. But when you push infrastructure off on affordable housing developers, you lose that affordability all day long.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
James, thanks so much for your presentation, and thanks to each of the panelists. I've really learned a lot today. Unless I misheard, we have 400,000 people in Jacksonville that are struggling with housing costs, and James, you're talking about 50 homes, and Shannon, you're talking about 100 to 300 homes. That 400,000 is probably bigger, will be bigger tomorrow than it is today. I'm not trying to rain on this parade, but it seems almost like we're trying to just, drain the ocean.
Sounds like we need a business plan.
Well, we need a business plan, and I think there's got to be a partnership with government, the private sector, and nonprofits. I think us trying to do this on our own isn't going to work. For profit, they're only going to make money if the demand is there, right? So, having stipulations from government that they're going to be involved, I happen to believe that when everybody and their mother's throwing money to buy a house at any cost, that's probably a market top. And you know, I think there's going to be an opportunity in the next several years for acquisition of properties, and I'm not 100% convinced anymore that home ownership is really the ultimate goal. The goal is affordable housing. If you can make equity, then that's better, but you need a place to live first. So I'm not really sure that I've heard much in terms of how we can help to move that needle. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or.
The way, there's so many ways. One, because I think you're absolutely right. This is not one individual sector's issue. This is a collective issue. And we all, everyone in this room from all different sectors representing both the Donors Forum, but also your day job business for those of you who have, you know, different businesses you're running, or the church that you go to, or the civic organization that you're part of. Everybody has to be realizing things have changed in this community, and the numbers are daunting, but they're not unsolvable. If we're intentional, if we demand certain things, if we're willing to put, and I don't remember what the numbers are, $85 million into Project X, okay, can we put the same amount into an affordable housing project? Do a dollar for dollar match. Or 50 cents on the dollar, or 10 cents on the dollar. $8.5 million would advance affordable housing dramatically. It is as equally valuable economic development as that project is. But it needs the community support to make it happen. But government isn't going to do that if they're going to get lambasted all the time. They need the community to have their back. They need the community to support their leadership on this topic. And it has to become what Bill Gulliford, when he was council president, told me, the sacred cow. Because we got term limits here. It's got to outlive each administration and be the thing that is not negotiable. We're doing this. And the next mayor knows we're doing this, and the next council president knows this is the thing. We've got to do this. And that's what this room can help create, is that environment. We were asked to expand to Central Florida because of their mayors, Mayor Jacobs and Dyer from Orange and Orlando, and the business leaders, Disney, Universal, Advent Health, you know, and then the faith community all got together, created a commission on homelessness because they were demanding that they do something collectively. They didn't want it to be a government issue. It is a community issue. And they are now investing heavily in creating affordable housing because, big shock, the cure to homelessness is a place to live. By definition, you're not homeless if you have a place to live. The mayors were able to do things that they did and make investments that they made because this commission had their back and created the social will to make those investments. Government can't do that alone.
And for me, I think affordable housing is just the overarching topic. It's what does affordable housing look like when it's on the ground in an under-resourced neighborhood? What does affordable housing look like when it's in historic East Side? And I would offer that it has the capacity to transform a neighborhood. Again, I get back, and you've heard me say this multiple times, that we have to make communities like historic East Side and Durkeeville destinations where people want to live. You cannot have neighborhoods in a city like Jacksonville where 44% of the children that live in that neighborhood are living below the poverty line. That is a recipe for a disaster, because any kid who grows up in that neighborhood, 7 times out of 10, they're going to be revolving back into that neighborhood. Poverty begets poverty. There's current research that says that if you come from a neighborhood that is poor, you have to live a life that is darn near perfect in order for you to succeed. I don't know about you all, but getting from upstairs downstairs in my house, I'm imperfect. Can you imagine what a kid who lives in an environment that he has to be perfect from birth to adulthood in order to succeed? And so when we talk about affordable housing, I like to watch that aside and say, what are we talking about as it relates to neighborhoods where people actually live? How do we transform that and get those people who we know are creating value for our society to move back into those neighborhoods so that kid can have the opportunity to see himself projected in something other than an athlete or an entertainer?
Let's get 2 more questions in.
Very quickly, I live in Nassau County, and we have nothing. Are you, as a builder, prepared to go like to Nassau County and help do some building if we get to that point? We're not there yet.
So yes, Ability Housing actually is trying to, we tried to do some housing in Nassau County and it just became economically not viable. We're very interested in trying to create some rental housing in Nassau County. We're really trying to connect from Nassau County down I-95 to Daytona and over through Osceola County. That's kind of the area we're looking to serve, and I wouldn't be surprised if it extends to Tampa.
I'll say from Liskin, and my former board chair is here, so I might get in trouble for saying this, but we are committed to affordable housing in the Jacksonville DMA wherever affordable housing opportunities exist. We are.
You've described in superb detail, and I compliment all of you for both what you do and how you've tried to educate us. But like a prior question a moment ago, you take whether it's 200,000, 300, 400,000 people that are in your statistics of struggling with having affordable housing, and you take $200,000 of a house, $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and before long you're talking real money. But you also mentioned that the problem was in the magnitude of about $6,000 per family on average between being able to afford housing at the 30%. You can do a whole lot with $6,000, a lot of people with $6,000 increments versus the capital intense building concept that y'all represent. I spent 25 plus years on the Habijacks board. Mrs. Weaver, God bless her for her vision, her contribution to this city, came up with a plan that we just finished some tiny homes that are very affordable for significantly smaller numbers than I'm hearing y'all talk. And I'm wondering if your comments on, would the money be better spent trying to help people get into the employment of these construction services so that their living standards are created by their own earnings. And what we're doing is using some part of $6,000 to help them just participate in the existing free market.
So if I could, one, I think there's two ways you make housing affordable. You reduce the cost of the housing to be affordable at the income the person is earning, or you raise the income so that they can afford the house at the cost of the housing. Both are the options. We have to do both and. It is not either or. We've got to, Ability Housing is working very hard on intergenerational poverty. We want to make it so none of the children living in our housing today need affordable housing as adults. We're working with preschools and early learning centers and trade schools and things like that to get kids into certification programs. Not kids, teenagers through grown adults into certification programs with guaranteed jobs that are well paying at the other side. Because in the end, the ultimate goal is to make it so we don't need more affordable housing. I think we need to do all of those things. I think the challenge with only focusing on the appraisal gap or the down payment gap is what I'll call it to make the housing affordable is we don't have enough stock. There are people moving in, and we are just now reaching our pre-crash housing production numbers. That was 2008. It's 2021, and we're just returning to annual production numbers of single-family homes from before the crash. And we have people moving into this community at astronomical rates. So we can't just do one. We have to do all of it.
My comments are going to be similar. I don't think, given our three different approaches, that is the one. It's, in fact, a combination of all. And I would also say the problem is pretty big. It's about understanding where do you start. I think you can't afford to not start because the problem is too big. I've witnessed so much over 20 years, and I've learned so much along the way. You begin to appreciate that the journey of 1,000 miles began with the first step. So in those 20 years, there's been 4 mayors, soon to be 5 mayors, so many different strategies. One thing that has not really wavered much is the plight of the people. So you begin to understand how important it is to have a plan, the plan, a multiple of plans that have implementation strategies that allow us to move from where we are and away from crisis. We have to begin with some level of understanding, not that somebody else's problem, or someone described a tale of two cities across bridges. We're one city with a lot of different problems. And as the foreclosure crisis really hit its hardest, some of my friends in more affluent communities also suffered. And we began to appreciate how much we really had in common. It's about understanding that we must together think of our community about the city that we want to be. That regardless if you're in Antigua or Northside Jacksonville, we have a lot that we have to figure out together, because the problems will just move if we don't start with the root causes. Housing is a major problem. It is not the only problem, but we have something that we have to think about if homelessness means a person without a home.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, James, for moderating. Can we give everyone a round of applause? And thank each of you. Believe it or not, we've already been here for 90 plus minutes, engaging on just scratching the surface of this topic. So give yourselves a round of applause for your attention. Thank you. My name is Tom Karen. I have the honor and privilege of now serving on the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida's team as the Director of Donor Services. I'm a co-curator of the Donors Forum, both today and moving forward. So I wanted to give you a sneak peek of what we are going to be looking at in early February. As soon as we have the date, you will be shared with that information. We are going to be doing a sneak peek at an event that is going to launch in March around a campaign for grade level reading. It was a string of words. I wanted to make sure I got correct. So the campaign for grade level reading, it is going to be a funders forum specifically dedicated to that campaign, and we'll share more. That's going to be coming again in early February. But first, I want to let you know that after the 90 minutes spent today, we have been recording this event, and we will be producing an issue brief. As we saw over the last 90 minutes, this cannot be the end of the conversation. So we will be producing additional information over the next couple of years to continue to keep you informed. My colleague and the goddess of philanthropy, Joanne, will be readily available to take your questions and continue, per your passion for this and your alignment to your philanthropy, we will continue to engage on this topic alongside you. Again, thank you for being here. And it was just me between you and the door. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.